7:05, so we'll call this meeting to order tonight, January 28th. Going over the agenda, we do have a few things that we want to take out of order on that. We don't need a, okay. So I guess first order of business. Do you have a copy of that for me? Thank you. So we will meet with the police department. Chief, would you and your staff like to, Mr. Falone, would you like to come up too?
Here. Officer Falone is just going to take a minute, introduce the famous Finn. If he'll get up.
Media star.
Yeah.
Rock star. It's tough being a star.
Oh, this was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Finn, our newest addition.
It's so
Yeah.
Doing great so far. He's been
Yeah.
2 weeks, going on week number 3. Growing like a weed. And that'll be good for us.
good stuff.
Wanted to bring him up, let you guys see him.
Excellent.
Thank you.
How did the name get selected?
Well, actually, Brett and I went back and forth with numerous names, and it was the first one we could actually agree upon. So
All right.
we said, I said one, he said one, we went back and forth, and finally, I think we were looking it up, we were Googling it, and he said Finn, and I'm like, Finn? Yeah, that's not
Finance
bad,
committee.
but yeah.
He's on finance.
Yeah, FinCom. That's why, yeah, very good.
Yeah, FinCom.
What a tribute.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's how we came up with the name, and Finn was donated to us, so there was no cost to the department, and moving forward, any expenses that he incurs will pay out of our asset forfeiture account, so it won't come out of the operational budget at all. He's been good for us so far, internally and externally. The kids at the school love him. Ladies, definitely at the senior center like him. Everybody downstairs love him, so far so good.
Awesome, awesome.
She's adorable.
Good stuff.
So we'll cut him loose because he's up past his.
Yeah, you look a little tired.
Long day, spent a lot of time in high school today, so.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, Howard's going to be sad. He
cue.
missed the-
Look at that.
he missed the dog, but,
You can visit the dog downstairs.
okay. All right, bye, Finn. Bye. Thanks for
Thank
bringing
you.
him.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Brett.
That was the highlight of my day.
Good to see you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Miglianico, I'm the Chief of Police. I've been going on my 3rd year now as Chief. As a lieutenant, I helped Chief Foley with the budget for numerous years, so I'm pretty well versed in what we have. So I'll go through this as thoroughly as I can for you, and if you have any questions, you can let me know at any time. So this year's request does not have any increase in personnel or hours. So it is for the same amount of people that we had last year in this year's budget. Right now, we have 15 full-time officers, 4 full-time dispatchers, 5 reserve officers, and 6 part-time dispatchers for a total of 30 employees, 19 of which are full-time and 11 are part-time. So with me, I have also the lieutenant, I have detective sergeants, 3 patrol sergeants, and 9 patrolmen. And obviously, we work 24/7, 365 days a year. We're fully staffed all year round. In the salary side of the budget, the police department budget consists mainly of 3 components. So we have the salaries, our expenses, and cruisers. Those are the 3 main line items that come up to the bottom line. So I'll go through the salaries first, and then we'll do the expenses, and we'll talk briefly about the cruisers. So this salary line item, the end number there, it consists of 8 line items. Of those 8, 7 of them are dictated by contract, by contractual obligations. The only one that is not is the part-time salaries. So those part-time salaries line item is for shifts that we use the part-time per diem people to cover open shifts by the full-time officers and full-time dispatchers. So that line item there in and of itself covers approximately 400 some odd shifts throughout the year. Everything.
I'm sorry, when you say cover, that's for sick time, vacation time, those type of coverage items?
Yep, sick time, vacation.
So if somebody is out
holiday.
on their regular scheduled shift,
Right,
in other words?
when a full-time officer's out. In addition to that, 2 of our full-time dispatchers are also part-time officers. So if something opens up on the road, say there's a sick call or someone takes a day off on a 3 to 11 shift, and I have a dispatcher who's also a part-time officer working 3 to 11 on a desk, I can take him, put him on the road instead of paying overtime, and then fill his shift for the part-time dispatcher. It saves money, and we have full coverage
Yep,
that we would have had.
working efficiently.
Right. So that line item covers about 400 some odd shifts, just over 400. Total altogether, there's about 700, and with everybody's time off and holiday pay, sick pay, everybody's vacation pay, or vacation time, it ends up being over 700 shifts per year that we need to be filled, so.
That's like 2 a day.
Right. Yeah, it could be up to 2 a day. And some get filled, some don't, depending on how many people we had on scheduled. If there were 3 people on and someone takes a day off instead of backfilling it, depending on what day it is and, the activity that we think we might have, we'll go without filling it. But for the most part, we use part-timers. Whatever's not filled by the part-time, and if it needs to be filled, that will go to overtime. That's part of what the overtime gets spent.
Yeah.
But if you look at the totality of the circumstances, out of 700, if you were paying 732 shifts worth of overtime, it would be 3 times what that 58,000 is.
Absolutely.
The part-time, so we're in pretty good shape there. In addition to that, we also get some grant money. We anticipate getting some more grant money from State 911, which allows us to use those dispatchers who are also part-time officers, which contributes to that. The only problem is with that, it's hard to factor in at this point in time because those grants don't become available until May. And even if they tell you in January, February that they're going to be available in May, you really can't count on it because they pulled the plug at the last minute. So
Yep.
you got to factor that in now. So there could be a surplus at the end of the year in that account if we get that money from 911, but you have to take the precaution.
Yep, no, taking a conservative approach makes sense.
Right.
Do you have guys on staff who are focused on the grant writing?
Myself and the lieutenant do most of the grant writing.
Okay.
The grants coming from the state, like State 911, are basically earmarked every year. So our community,
Okay.
you're basically earmarked for X amount of dollars. They give us, State 911, if they continue the grant, we can get a little over $30,000 that we can use for equipment, training, and backfill shifts. They
So
also-
is that kind of automatic, getting the grant?
The amount would be automatic. If the grant goes through like they say it will, the amount is earmarked for certain towns, depending on what you have for 911 calls. So depending on how big the town is and what they take in for 911 calls, bigger town, more 911 calls, they may get more grant money. But most of the communities, the amounts are earmarked based on population, amount of 911 calls you take in. However, on average, the past couple of years, and since we started taking on 911 cell phone calls, it's increased to a little bit over $30,000, which is another 230 shifts that we can use to fill part-time money and cell phone. Going through the rest of these accounts, you have the salaries, which is contractual obligations, full-time salaries for all full-time personnel. That's the full-time officers and full-time dispatchers, which is covered by the contract and the town's compensation plan for full-time dispatchers. The overtime, the only reason that really has changed because with the increase in the salaries, the hourly overtime rate changes. So there's no additional hours there. The only increase in that line item from this year is based on the hourly rate change. So the hours are the same, but the number obviously because of that. The education incentive, which is contractual as well, that's up $4,000 this year because I anticipate replacing an officer next year. The lieutenant's going to be retiring, and the officer that will be hiring in his place, have a couple candidates in-house already that will have an associate's degree, so that will go up when one of those gentlemen is hired. Shift differential is the same thing, same amount of shifts, That is the same as last year. That hasn't gone up. Personnel will remain the same. Longevity, and then we have the uniform allowance to finish out those accounts. Again, these accounts, 7 of them are contractual obligations, so there's really no room for movement there. So the total for the salary side is $1,638,138, which puts it up about 3.4% over last year.
Yes.
Hi, Howard.
Hey, Howard. Good, thanks.
What does longevity mean?
Longevity is years with the department, so if you have your copy of the contract and you go down, copy of the budget, you go down to that last paragraph, if you look at our longevity, that's contractual obligation. So 15 officers, full-time officers that we have, one of those officers has over 30 years of service, so he gets a stipend for being here over 30 years. I believe it's $1,600 for being here over 30. And then we have 2 that have more than 25 years, 2 that have more than 20 years, and 2 that have more than 15 years, 4 that have over 10 years. So 80% of our department has been here over 10 years. They get some form of, it starts at the lower end, but after they've been here for 5 years, I think it's 600, that goes up to 10 years. And with the maximum step of 30 years. Don't quote me on it, it's either 1,300 or 1,600, one of those, but no higher than 1,600.
All right.
So that's what that is, that you take all the officers who are eligible for that, and that adds up to that 14.2 for next year.
So Chief, was this the budget, the 1.4, then it went up, is 3% of that, that's 1.6?
I started it, you could take
So
over if you...
last year's
All right,
salaries,
okay.
I have $1,584,171. That's
Okay.
what we had for salaries last year.
Okay.
That book's,
Was that 1,506?
Yeah.
That says?
but that's 2018.
Okay.
He's looking at.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so last year's, for FY20, the salaries was $1,584,171. This year's request is $1,638,138, which is up 3.4%. Now, the calculations for that, to have that go up 3.4%, there's a contractual obligation for a 1.75 increase in salaries, and then there's another 1% increase on those salaries if we achieve accreditation before July 1st. In October, we were able to have our first assessment on certification, which we have passed, and in March, we'll be going for accreditation, which they'll come in and do our assessment. And we have already had our mock, which we passed, and so when they come in March, I don't anticipate any problems. So we should, if all goes as planned with the commission's timeline, achieve the accreditation in March, and we'll get the notification prior to July. So you take that 2.75, add that to the increase, plus that $4,000 for the additional associate's degree that we don't have this year, and then the change in the salaries for the overtime rates, that equates to the 3.4 increase in salaries.
I think there's one officer stepping.
Right, that,
4 or 1 to 2, I'm not sure.
3 of them actually. Yeah, so there'll be 3 that also have a step increase. So we have probationary step 1, step 2.5, step 4, step 5, and step 10. So we also, within that calculation, we'll have 3 that will be moving, but it's mid-year, so it's actually hard to calculate exactly. I mean, I could give it to you, how many weeks they're gonna be at step 3, how many weeks they're gonna be at step 4, but it's really minimal within.
The chief was correct at 25 years beyond 1,600.
Right.
It was 13 to 20 to 25.
That's
You couldn't just let them ballpark it?
No,
Nah, with Gene.
really, no.
Gene doesn't make up numbers.
I have to
Someone's
tease.
gonna do that.
Any questions?
You said, what, 6.5 was the number around between last year and this year altogether?
Increase?
Yeah.
3.4.
Oh.
3.4, so 3.4 on the salaries,
Yeah.
the salary side. So if there's no other questions on salaries, I can move into the expenses, and I can just give you that number. So the expense side for this year is up 1.5%. Well, the request is up 1.5%. On the expense side, you look at it on page 3, there's 25 accounts, line items in the total expense side. 5 of those accounts, in and of itself, accounts for like 60% of that money, which is our repairs and maintenance, which is around $18,675. Now that's repairs and maintenance for all the cruisers, anything that generator, the department's generator, so that's maintenance for that, any repairs that need to be done. Our training, our computer software is at $18,350 alone for the year. Our fuel is our biggest account, which is $34,000 estimated. We use about 14,000 gallons a year. Right now, we're right around $2.40 per gallon. I know a couple years ago, it went up to $3, and we're all, never thought it would get down below 3, but it has. But still, we average about 14,000 gallons. And our last one is dues and memberships, which is, there's some contractual items in there as well that total up to about $7,000. So those 5 accounts right there, like I said, add up to about $95,000 out of that 156, and those other 20 accounts eat up the rest of that money. So in fiscal year 2018, with the same amount of accounts, at the end of the year, we had a surplus of about $1,050. And in 2019, we had a surplus with all these same accounts about $1,152. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in there. You're talking about one brake job all the way around, and you're eating up that money. So we looked at the past spending in each one of these accounts, and some of these accounts are less. When you go line item by line item, some are less based on past spending, some are right where they were based on past spending, and some went up a little bit based on past spending. And if they went up, it wasn't much more than 1.5%. But at the end of the day, when you get to the bottom line of the expenses are up 1.5. So last year's expense request was 153,810. This year's request is 156,100, which is exactly 1.5%. That's basically it for the expenses. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Sure.
So there are 3 that are a little bit vague,
Okay.
like other supplies, other services, or additional equipment. Is that kind of standard wording for wishy-washy stuff?
No. We don't have wishy-washy stuff. No, it's basically the chart of accounts is structured so it fits all departments. So if there isn't a huge need to break them down, we break down fuel, we break down heating oil, electricity, those big ticket items. Other than that, we have other supplies. For cable would be DVD tapes. For, I'm not sure what you have.
Yeah, it's basically whatever doesn't fit. The way I do it is whatever doesn't fit specifically in one of these accounts, I set it up as an other supply, and then Gene and I have the debate, well, is this an other supply or is this an other service? And my answer is, you tell me, because I don't know. That's why I set it up like this. But it's usually for miscellaneous stuff. Like other supplies could be, something that we don't often use that we need from WB Mason. Say, the guy who does the court request needs certain things like envelopes for the CDs that we send out to put. It could be, yeah, it could be a number of things. It's-
Other services would be the
Services.
cleaning
Yeah.
they have downstairs. So you can't have the chart of accounts so long that every single item gets its own category. So there is some grouping together for some things like other supplies, other services.
I would have to, if I could, what I could do is I could pull my past payments and my sheets out of that, and I could show you specifically, or I could email it to Howard, or whatever, or I could email you individually and just let you know exactly what we pay out of that account, to give you an idea of what the other supplies
Yeah,
are.
and you can come to see me as well. You know, I'll have it broken down by vendor.
Do you want that breakdown?
Think about it.
Okay. All right.
What's insurance, 850?
So the insurance is, we have a drone, we operate a drone
Oh,
as
okay.
well. So when we moved to the drone, one of the things we were concerned about as part of, we work with SEMLEC, which is the regional team, and every department that has one is required to have an individual policy outside of the town's insurance in case something happened with it. So that covers any damage to the drone, and if for some reason something happened with the drone, there was an accident, we cover any injuries or anything that happens to anybody in the ground. What were your other questions on the other account? Oh, the other services, other supplies, same thing with, like Gene said, services are people that we have come in to do something. We have a company that comes in every 2 weeks to clean the bathrooms and do the floors, do the hallway, wax the floors, you know, that's
Cleaning the
another
cruisers.
service.
When we
Have the cars detailed twice a year in spring prior to whatever service that would not fit into one of these categories.
And if they had a bad guy that, you know.
Right. Damages,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to sell cruisers decontaminated if there's bodily fluids in there, you know, services such as that.
Chief, I know last year, near the end, I just talked to you about, can you give us, I kind of like to keep an eye year over year on the status of the cruisers and what we need to buy this year, what we apparently don't need to buy this year,
Right.
and what our projection is next couple of years.
Okay. We're in great shape with the cruisers. So unfortunately, well, 2 years ago, we had one of the new cruisers was totaled after it was a year old. So it was replaced, and so we ended up basically getting 3 cruisers in 1 year. That was 2 fiscal years ago. Going into this fiscal year, last year, you remember we had the conversation, we were going to get 2. They were changing over the models. We looked at it, we looked at the changes, we looked at what it was going to cost us if we waited another year for the equipment, because when they change the models of the cars, the equipment usually changes. So we had the opportunity to buy the 3rd cruiser last fiscal year. So long story short is, we're in great shape with the cruisers, all 6 have been replaced, and we won't have the need to replace the next 2 cruises until 2024. We'll be back on our 2-year cycle. Because we went 3 and 3.
Yeah.
2024, I'll be back and say, okay,
Start at 2.
we're going to start at 2. We'll be on our 5th year, probably be over 100,000 miles, just getting over that 5-year warranty. So right now, all these cruises, the entire fleet, 6 cruises that are running constantly are 18s and 19s.
Great.
Nice.
And that's going to zero out this line item for this year, so there'll be nothing in there for cruises this year. Yeah.
Anybody else?
One quick compound question. This first one is, so how much did the overtime go up or down last year versus this year? Like percentage-wise, ballpark? In other words,
How much did it go up?
I didn't have the fiscal contract for last year in front of me, so.
So there was no increase in hours. I'd have to look at the number that was in there, I can get that for you. So there was no increase in hours. The only reason that it went up, that number went up, because the hourly rates changed. So what I did is we averaged about 2,200 hours of overtime per year. And that's going back, looking the past 3 or 4 years. So you take that, and what I did was, there's different overtime hourly rates for each rank. So sergeants
Yeah, yeah.
are obviously higher, so take the average overtime rate and just times that by the 52, I'm sorry, by the 2,200 hours, and that's what you come up with, 119.
Okay. Nice.
But there was no, like I said, increase in hours. It's just the only reason that line item has changed is because the salary allowance changed.
Your multiplier went up, basically, it's
And so-
algebraic. yeah.
Right.
I know you probably have a million other things to do than track what the overtime reasons are, or do you guys keep track of that type of thing, like
Yep.
breakdown?
Clearly, like I said, if we have to fill a shift, the first thing we do is we try and do it with a part-timer, which saves us an immensely amount of money. Because you're looking at paying somebody, you're looking at paying somebody in the range of $18 an hour opposed to $52 an hour. So you save a lot of money, you get a lot more out of the money that you have in your budget.
Yep.
But, so first goes to a part-timer, you fill with a part-timer, and it needs to be filled, and it goes to overtime. That is cause of some of the overtime. Overruns on shifts, if something comes up at the end of the shift, or an investigation, you could get an investigation that goes around the clock for, a day and a half, and you're paying 2 guys overtime, depending on what it is, but you can accrue it awfully quick. Court time, anytime they go to court outside their regular, court time is a big expense because they get a minimum of 4 hours. They usually have to go to Worcester for court, and it's usually an all-day affair. By the time they, call the case, second call, first call, second call, they're after 11, and it usually ends up being 4 to 6 hours overtime. So the majority of it is court times, investigations, overruns, not so much shift coverage because we cover a lot of that with the part-timers.
Okay.
But it's all of it combined. Same thing with holiday pay. If they work a holiday, they're eligible for holiday pay, which comes out of the overtime account. Some guys take the holiday pay, some guys take the day off at another time, we fill it with part-time, and it saves some money. It's a culmination of everything. To be honest with you, there's really no.
You guys have a pretty good, it sounds like you have a pretty good handle on it, is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
It's not rampant, in other words.
With Mr. Wojcik, it's departments our size who don't have the opportunity to use part-timers like we do. Their overtime account is probably close to $100,000 more than us.
That's what I kind of wanted to get to, was we're doing very well
Yes.
versus other towns.
Right, because we have the part-timers in place and because we've been.
We're managing it well.
Process that we have the past couple of years.
You also do
Got
it
it.
well because of the way you're configured, so back of your mind, as the community grows, what you'll have to bear in mind is not only might you face the eventuality of adding an officer, but adding a second person to dispatch. Because one person may no longer be able to keep up with the volume. So at that point, his dynamic from covering overtime might change.
That was something.
But it might change.
That was something I was just going to bring up, was is there a certain break-even point that you've identified or potentially have looked at to say, at some point, this overtime amount of 119 might grow to X, and at that point, is it more beneficial to bring in an additional person at, a full-time salary range, fully loaded with the benefits and the comp and all the rest of
Right,
that?
see if it's going to reduce the overtime.
Right, right. Would you be able to reduce the overtime hours and the need for that?
technique, there's 2 ways to approach it. One is to hire a floater. If you don't have the resources. If you have the resources, you add a body to each shift. And you absorb that. So just to be real accurate, the answer is actually, fiscal 2019 was 108,854. Fiscal 20, the budget is 111,287. Now you're 119. That's really doesn't reflect, as the chief has already said, the 1% bump for renovation, which is worth its weight in gold,
Right.
added to it.
Yeah.
And people are stepping up. So the individuals who are stepping up, their overtime rates going up quite a bit.
Right. And then, so that, like I said, what I did is I took each rank, and because you may get a shift that you fill, with a sergeant. It might be a sergeant and a patrolman on it. If a patrolman didn't take the overtime, the sergeant's rate is going to be higher. So I just took the average rate of what it would be.
Yeah, because you can't.
Yeah, you're doing the best, you can't predict the future.
Who you're gonna fill
You
with
can do it at the end of the
hours.
year. I could say, okay, the sergeant's worked 600 out of the 2,200 hours, but there's no way to figure that out or predict that during the year because you just don't know.
I might not repeat
But
that.
the bottom line is, with the philosophy that we've had over the last couple of years by using the part-timers and using them the way that we do, and it's twofold. It saves us money, and we have the opportunity to train good people in-house so when a position does open up, people are ready to step up and move into the full-time role. And it's not a lot of training. We already know them. They're already part of the department. And it's worked out great for us. So I don't plan on changing anything as far as that, as long as we can do it.
Good stuff.
So expense-wise, that's what I have, unless you have any other questions. And we've already touched on the cruises. The cruises line item last year, because we added that third cruiser, it ended up going up to 122.5. So that 122.5 is now out for this year. So the bottom line number for this request is just salaries and expenses for $1,794,238. And again, we won't have to look at purchasing the cruises again until 2024, and at that point, we'll look at going back to the 2 and 2 cycle. So you'll know exactly what we'll have for a number.
Nice. Awesome.
Anybody else? Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Yeah, and if you have any additional questions, just send me an email and I'll get you
Thanks
whatever.
for keeping us safe, right?
All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, appreciate it.
Howard, you
Have a good
missed the
night.
dog.
Howard, stop down anytime. if need be.
My dog. There you go. Yeah, there you
They
go.
don't find it.
Yeah.
Yes. Good night.
Thanks.
Nice.
I think if it's okay, if we have Chief Vincent.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Nice to see you all. Some of you I might
Have we
not.
gone around the room once? Why don't we-
You did.
I always like just once on the tape, run around for Matt, and going to Matt's left. Just introduce yourself, please.
I'm Chief Vincent, Fire Department.
Chief,
Matthew,
I hear you have a contract.
That could be.
Gene,
Jane Love, the Finance Director.
Lynn Mazzulli, Finance Committee.
Mike Hodnack, Finance Committee.
Howard Domingo,
Phil Landry, Finance Committee.
Heather Moore's High School.
Sandy Kuipers.
Dick Vandenberg, longtime Douglas resident,
And runner.
and Finance Committee.
Hi.
a couple of new members, right?
Yeah,
First guys I tracked
I'm
on.
American.
3 months,
All right.
2 months, 3 months.
So Chief, the police department has a dog. Where's your Dalmatian?
You know, I had more than one person ask me that question. As a matter of fact, in Mendon, the chief, we was from Uxbridge, has, I forget his name, I'll think of it. They have a Dalmatian, but when he left Uxbridge, he went to Mendon. Oliver.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And he's a great dog, too.
Yeah, we might need.
I don't know, at some point,
Usually-
we'll see what we
I can borrow Oliver.
Well, I'm gonna open up tonight and talk a little bit about the staffing of the fire department. Obviously, I have 2 budgets to present, but what I'm gonna do is try to hit the high points and not keep you here all night.
I like him already.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the staffing. Obviously, myself, the fire chief and the paramedic. I have 1 call deputy chief, it's John Furno, he's also a basic EMT. I have 2 call captains, one's an EMT basic and one's a paramedic. 3 full-time lieutenants, 2 are paramedics, 1 is an EMT basic. I have 2 call lieutenants, one's an EMT basic and one's a first responder. 8 call firefighters, 5 of them are EMT basics, 4 per diem paramedics, 3 per diem basics, 2 probationary firefighters, and 1 assistant, administrative assistant. Any questions about any of that? We run 2 paramedic ambulances that are staffed at the advanced life support level, so basically we bring the emergency room to you. As far as activity, this past year, we did 346 fire calls in Douglas, and we did just under 800 ambulance calls.
Wow.
We did mutual aid where we had ambulances requested from us 41 times, and then we requested an ambulance from another town 67 times. And the reason for that was we had a second ambulance that was out of service for maintenance problems. I just did not trust it, and I wasn't putting a sick patient in. I wasn't taking that risk. So we've since, thanks to the town, we got a new ambulance last year at the end of in the fall, in November, and then this year, we got another ambulance in November. And the state, actually, Senator Fatman and Congressman Representative McKenna were very instrumental in getting us $100,000 to put towards that ambulance. So we took delivery of that in late November. So we're looking good with ambulances, and that's really a positive thing. For fire salaries, I'll break down the highlights. We requested $415,320 for the fire salaries. That was up $37,053, and the reason for that, we had one, really having a hard time with these glasses. We had a couple of spots open up. We had one guy leave. We've had some turnover. We had a guy leave that went to another department. He was a lieutenant, had to fill that spot. So one of our basics was promoted to a lieutenant, which net him about an $18,000 raise. Also, we lost another EMT basic, and talking to the town administrator, I requested that we replace that person with a paramedic. So that's what took place there. And it's very important to have paramedics. What happens is, it's difficult when we run PB most of the time, which is a basic and a paramedic. We're trying to get to the point where we have two paramedics, so you always have the highest level of skill across the board. And the state requires us at the advanced life support level with our license to have a paramedic on the ambulance. So if I get a sick paramedic that calls in sick, I have more medics to fill that with, and that's important, so we can keep that basic level of service. So that's the salaries, which I said was $37,053 more, and those were those two adjustments. As far as expenses on the fire department side, we were requesting $126,369, which is $12,000 more than last year, and we had a couple of reasons for that. Under the maintenance contracts, we went up $1,000 on a maintenance contract for our boiler in the fire department. We changed companies about a year and a half ago. We had a different company. We got a new company now, and we signed a maintenance contract, and that maintenance contract cost us $1,000 a year. Other supplies, we increased $3,000, and the reason for that was, as a fire department, we are held to standards. Fire departments are run by professional standards, and those standards are the National Fire Protection Association. They set standards for everything on the fire department. And hose has to be tested annually. Much like the pumps on the trucks have to be tested annually, the aerial on the truck has to be tested annually, all that stuff to protect you from litigation and protect you if someone were to get hurt and then you didn't meet that standard, it's going to cost a ton of money. So when it comes to hose, we don't have the staffing to test our hose. We've been doing it, but the more our calls increase, we're not able to keep up to it. So in order to do that, we'll call in an outside company. They're also not biased. They're not letting stuff slide that maybe we wouldn't, we might tend to cut loose at times. And the other thing is none of us are certified in testing hose. And really certifications come into play. Our hose tester, how long, we got that maybe 20 years ago. It's not calibrated. So what we did was we put that earmark in there to try to bring a company in so that we're able to meet that standard every year. Keep our citizens and our firefighters safe with our hose. Last thing you want is to be inside fighting a fire and your hose bursts because you didn't test it. So that would not be a good thing. So that we went up $3,000 there. We also went up $7,000, but it's up to $7,000 for uniforms on the fire department side. Our uniforms on the fire department side are contract. There's a contract. Each firefighter gets $1,000 a year to upgrade their uniforms, replace older equipment, get new shoes, things like that. And we also put in, because our call firefighters, many of them did not have uniforms to wear, so we make them, we give them a T-shirt or something like that. It's a little bit demotivating to be on the team, but you don't get a uniform. So we put it in and requested that $2,500 on the fire side and $2,500 on the ambulance side, for a total of $5,000 more. So we could get everybody equipped with two uniforms to wear. Also for training, we went up from, we increased from $500 for travel time. It takes about 220 hours to put a call person through the firefighter academy. Up until this point, nobody has ever been paid to go to that academy. They've done that out of the goodness of their heart because they were motivated and they wanted to learn how to be firefighters. At this point, we still don't pay people to do that. However, they're traveling to Stowe, which is a good distance away, almost an hour away. So we put in for $1,000 for mileage to cover anybody that went to the academy, so they would get mileage for that. And then replacement equipment is one section, and that would be, we went up $6,500. One set of turnout gear for firefighters is about $2,000, just the coat and pants. We're not talking helmets, gloves, hoods, anything like that. So I had it in my replacement equipment, or I should say, my replacement equipment. I had a set. I could usually squeeze maybe 2-3 sets of gear. I've had a lot of turnover with people coming in to get them fit the gear. They leave to go somewhere else. Now I got to find someone to fit that gear. So it's important. And then the other thing is, there's an expiration date. There's an expiration date on that gear. It's supposed to be after 10 years. It's done. It's out of service. Can't train with it with live fire in it. So there's a liability thing there, and making sure that our gear is up to par and good as well. So as far as the gear goes, that's why we added that. So instead of 2 or 3 sets of gear, we're trying to replace 6 and rotate it around and always have good turnout gear.
So when we turn down a candidate, we say, just
I was waiting for someone
It sounds crazy, but I've actually, and what we used to do is, we would send someone to the academy, go to the, buy them all brand new gear. Guess what? 2 weeks before the academy's done, yeah, this isn't for me. It was too hard, so I'm done. Now I paid $2 grand for a set of gear, and now I don't have that person fitted. So what we started doing is, we can rent gear. We rent gear till they're out of the academy. Once they get their certification and all that, now maybe we'll buy a new set. We put it in the budget, and that was one of the requests for that. So all total on the fire department budget, with $415,320 for the salaries and $126,369. The total fire department budget request is $541,369. That's the fires. So does anybody have any questions on the fire?
So what percent is that up from last year, more or less?
I didn't figure it percentage-wise, but if I take, it's about 10% if you add the two positions where they get bumps and pay. One's a medic, and they get about $18,000 a year more than the patient.
That's on the salary side.
That's on the
For
salary.
expense side, you're only up 1 or 2%.
Yeah, exactly, correct. Yeah. Any other questions about that?
So the average is like 6% or whatever altogether, if you
It
figure?
doesn't work that way.
No. Okay.
Salaries are 80%.
Oh, I see, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My
So you
bad.
figure where you went up salary-wise and where you went up. Also, what I would like
Sorry
to
about
mention
that.
too is when Mr. Wojcik first came here, he said, okay, we're going to do a 5-year budget. I want you to project 5 years. And I looked at it and said, okay, how am I going to do this? And he said, figure what you think the department's going to need. And he said, anything that's blue on the page, anything that's highlighted blue, the number doesn't make sense. I said, my whole page is blue. I said, well, thank you very much for validating what I've been saying for the last 7 years.
Sure.
And then I put in what I actually thought I would need. And you know what I found? I found that I still mentally was cutting when I was coming up with the numbers instead of what I really would cost. So it's sort of ingrained in us to always try to shave money off. And I just found that as a habit, even trying to do that, it was cutting. I was still shortchanging. But any other questions on ambulance, on the fire side, Rob? Okay. On the ambulance side, for salaries, we have a request of $323,921, which was actually up $5,700. I'm trying to remember why that. Most of that's probably contracted, because they got steps and they got COLA increases. And some are, you got 3 of them on this side that are paramedics and their lieutenants. And we put them on the ambulance side because when we do ambulance calls, when we bill, it actually calls for a paramedic assessment. So they're paramedics, they're actually the ones doing the assessment, and so we put them on the ambulance side, and that's why they're on this side. So that's the salaries. As far as expenses, medical supplies, I requested $2,000 more, and the reason for that was Milford Hospital started charging us for certain medications. It used to be that we could, if we're within 3 months of an expiration date of a medication, we could bring it to them and say, hey, this is about to expire. They'd replace it, and then they'd take it because they're going to have more volume in the hospital, and they would use it right away. They started charging us for all the medications. So it went up. On the medical side, we have, let's see, $27,000 for meds, but we had allocated just the meds. We had another little line item underneath the medics, and it was just the medication. So we went up $2,000 just on the medications. And then the other side, I already talked about it. We went up $2,500 on uniforms. So we did $2,500 on the fire side, $2,500 on the uniform side. So the total request for our expenses was $99,942. I'm sorry, $242 for a total of $423,163 on the ambulance side. So any questions about the ambulance? Those are the only 2 changes on the ambulance side.
Chief, are you seeing the ambulance call volume going up?
It is. It was down this year.
Yeah.
It was a little below last year, what we were at this past year. The year before that, we did over 926. So there's that fluctuation up to over 100 calls. So it can dip or spike.
How do you determine where to take someone by ambulance?
It depends. It depends on what their level of consciousness is. If we feel they're critical and that they can't make a good decision for themselves, we will make that decision for them based on what we think. For instance, if we have a cardiac patient or a stroke patient we know is critically ill, we'll even tell them, listen, we're not taking you to that hospital, we're taking you to UMass because it wouldn't be good. And quite honestly, if we have a cardiac patient that's called a STEMI, ST elevation myocardial infarction, if we bring them to Milford, we're on the chopper. So they would say, why did you bring them here? We don't have a cath lab. So it's fluid. Every call is different. And, if a person's really not critically sick, then we'll give them the choice. We'd well, we'd like to go to Milford. That's what we'll bring. We'll honor those wishes of the family, but we'll advise them, hey, that's really against your best wishes. Does that make sense?
I just wondered.
Any other questions about the budget? Okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a minute. I started to tell you that when Matt first came on board about the blue page, what I did is I put in a request for a firefighter paramedic every year. So I'm asking for that again, knowing that it's not going to happen. But it's there, just to let you know, the staffing is an issue, and it's only going to get worse. There's going to be a time we're going to have to bite the bullet and have to do full-time members. So when I talked to the selectmen, I talked a little bit about some issues with the fire department that I wanted to bring attention to the selectmen and to the town administrator and to you folks as well. And I'm going to bring it to your attention. As you know, the call fire department, the on-call firefighter EMTs have been for years the backbone of the fire department, really supplementing and reinforcing the full-time operation of the fire department. But there is a growing trend that it's more and more difficult to recruit and to retain on-call firefighters. And there's some explanations for that. Some have, family commitments. Their obligations to their families are a lot more. Many of the parents have kids that are in sports, and their availability has really dropped off, and it's really not. It's more and more difficult to find firefighters. And this is nothing new, and it is a nationwide trend. It's not just Douglas, it's every town around us, and it's a nationwide trend. Some of the things that we've thought about doing to try to help the call fire department and maybe motivate, we talked about, well, you don't get a uniform. Well, that sort of demotivated. So part of that was getting them uniforms. That was part of the budget request. Also, there would be a nighttime minimum. Right now, our on-call firefighters, if we get a carbon monoxide call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I go on that call, and I get there as a chief because I get there first, and I get there and go, oh, it's just a faulty detector. And I say, okay, you can stand down, keep the truck in quarters, I don't need it. They come to the station, they drive there, they get paid a quarter of an hour if it only takes 15 minutes. They're not getting an hour, they're getting whatever if they're paid $14 an hour, they're getting maybe $4. So we got to fix it. So that's one of the issues. We talked about a rate verification.
Can you repeat that so I could be clear? You're saying they can get called at 2 in the morning, and then if it's a cool 25-minute call,
they get paid for
they get $6 or whatever.
Correct. That's where we're at.
Okay.
So
We're all
You don't know fiscal conservative until you've been.
correct. So
I'm just, yeah.
So that's one
I
thing.
wanted to make sure I clearly understood.
right.
You know?
You're trying to understand.
I said it.
why
I
they
said it a
answer
little
the phone,
fast. It
right?
takes a little bit of time to sink in.
That's the problem we're having.
Yeah.
And then we have a rate verification, the pay scale. For instance, for years, if you're a paramedic, you get a certain rate. Say it's $25 an hour. You're a captain on the fire side. Remember, 2 budgets. As a captain, I get $16 an hour. Okay, so which one do I want to work at? I obviously want to do the one where I'm getting more money for, although it's more times than not that people want to fight fire or then get blood on them on an ambulance call. So the higher rate of pay is there, okay? And it creates sort of a problem too, because let's say I respond on the engine because I'm a firefighter, but I'm a trained paramedic. I get off the engine, I get to a bad crash, realize, oh, you know what? They need help. That person's critically injured, so I'm going to get over here, I'm going to start an IV, I'm going to intubate a patient or whatever. But I'm getting $16 an hour instead of the 25. So in my opinion, there shouldn't be 2 rates. It should be 1 rate, and you should be paid for the highest rate that you're trained at. End of story. So that's a request. And however, in order to do that, we've got to come up with a wage scale that everyone is acceptable to everybody, and we've got to pass it at town meeting. So that was a request that we deal with that. We talked about the uniforms, money to replace old uniforms, and then we have Class A uniforms. The Class A uniform is full parade dress, parade type uniform. A funeral, you look professional, you're united as a department, everybody looks the same. All the full-time members pretty much have one. Call guys, well, I don't have a coat, or I don't have pants, and we've always said, well, go buy it. Well, how about we make them part of the team and they all get a Class A uniform, but they have to meet a certain threshold. In other words, you have to be here 5 years before we're going to invest in a full-time Class A. So those are some things that we talked about to try to address to help the on-call firefighters to, it could help with the availability. It may not, but usually it will help out to some extent for a time. And then I will say I have like maybe 4 more sentences, then I'm done.
No, you won't be done. I've got a whole bunch.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I'm done with what I have to present.
Right.
So, has everybody heard the term cascading failure? Okay. So cascading failure occurs when one part of a system fails, or when call firefighters or firefighters are not available to respond, which is becoming a growing trend. So therefore, when one part of an interconnected system fails, what happens? The whole system fails. So some of these things that we might address might actually temporarily help. But what I'm going to tell you is, it's going to help temporarily. That's all it's going to help. It will help, cover some of the gaps, like, a paramedic working, coming off an engine to work on a patient and getting paid what they're trained to do. In other words, that flexibility, that cross-train. But ultimately, it's going to be full-time help, round the clock, people in the station to be able to, answer calls. It does not take much. Think about it. If we get a crash tonight, ambulance goes out, you got a crash. Fire truck always goes. Why? It might be on fire. You might have to extricate someone out of the vehicle. You've got to create a barrier between the emergency scene and those, so a drunk driver doesn't run into the whole. So all those things are safety concerns. But if the call members aren't available, the ambulance gets out, but the rest doesn't, unless it's myself or the deputy or one of the call members who come. So it's just, I'm trying to highlight the weak links of the chain and just make you aware.
Do the majority of the firefighters live in town?
No.
No.
What has happened, a perfect example is, I was telling Mr. Wojcik, and I told the selectmen, my first 7 years here, I put about 8 to 10 guys through the Call Volunteer Academy, which is, it was 320, they lowered it to 220 hours, which, and again, if you count the travel time, it's 2 hours as well. Put about 8 people through, 8, 10 people, and got them on the department, had a good, robust, and then what happens? We go full-time, we hire some guys full-time, off of that list, and then they move out of town, or they go work somewhere else. I only have one firefighter on my full-time roster that lives in town. So it hurts. It hurts at night on the calls. But that's one of the reasons we're 24/7. But it's, getting the ambulance out and getting an engine out is very important. We had a fire the other night, Sunday about 7 o'clock at night. We got an engine, a ladder, and another engine on the road. And so we had 11 guys working the fire ground, which is unsafe. But we get it done. But we're automatically requesting mutual aid. And I have a set of alarm cards, run cards, that when I get to this level, I hit this alarm, I know I'm getting this amount of help because they're on my run. But it takes time for them to get there, a good 15 minutes. So you're scrambling for a while. When the rubber meets the road and we get something really significant, it's the bells and smells, it's the nuisance calls. But they're not a nuisance to the people who are calling. They're calling for a reason. So, when the rubber meets the road and you get the big bad one, they come out of the woodwork and they're well-trained and they do a great job. But we're in no different situation than any other town. If you talk to any chief, different face, same story.
So, Chief, who's in the station at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Right now, tonight, I have 2 paramedics in the station. Tonight, 11 to all night. Yeah.
Okay. No call firefighter?
No call firefighters on. No
firefighter through the night? Okay.
No, both.
Our medics are cross-trained to fight fire and.
Okay.
And.
I apologize, thank you.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So you said a couple of minutes ago you requested year over year for a firefighter paramedic. And that was on your soapbox. Is that in this request?
It's there every year.
Where is it? Is it in what's in front of us?
Well, it's in the 5-year breakdown. Every year there's a, but technically, it's not there but it's in my presentation to say, just so you know, every year I'm asking. I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm just trying to let you know that to be on the record, every year I request it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
He requested the budget model as a spot for it, the spot.
To Matt, I think.
Correct.
We don't budget the salary.
Wait a minute,
It's not in this headcount listing on the top page.
And how much?
why not?
It would be an unfunded, how I would look at it. It would be an unfunded.
That's basically what I'm trying to say. But it's still there, on the table as a request, always.
Why is it not
But you
in
could
front
put
of
it
us
as-
tonight?
You could put it as an unfunded, sir.
And maybe that's not a question for you, Chief. Why is it not in front of us tonight?
We don't have the money.
That's a different issue. That's your decision, but the chief is the head of his department. He just sat on his soapbox, he wanted that. Isn't that what we're supposed to hear? And we are
So
the ones
you are
that make
hearing
a
it.
decision as to what we want to propose to town meeting for a budget?
You can do that.
We've been through this the last couple of years.
Right, and
keep
I
getting
can give you the
confused.
same answer. The town administrator prepares the budget. When the selectmen decide whether that's going to be on the warrant in that format, FinCom may present its own budget. You may deviate from that. You'll have to find a way to pay for things and be as responsible as we are. But Howard, it's a simple answer. I don't put it in. We don't have the money. So I don't put it in.
So Matt,
There's nothing else to talk about.
actually there is.
Well, you can talk about it unless you want to, but you're asking why it's not in front of you. It's not in there because I don't put it in.
All right.
Because we went and had an override and we told people, no new heads. That's not stop interrupting me. That is not a promise that was made lightly by people. That is not a promise that I think it's fair for me to represent 5 members of the board and myself. We're not going to break that promise. If you want to, you can go to town meeting and ask for a different outcome, but don't expect the people who advocated for that override to break the promises they made to secure the support, all 14 votes of it, to get us to at least the point where we are today. The method for staffing public safety departments is a professional inquiry into the workload. Okay? So whether or not we're there in either police or fire is an extensive inquiry that we haven't started yet. But it's because you can look, that's a lot of calls, but it's also a lot of hours. It's 24 hours a day, every single day of the year. So spread the call volume out over that, and how busy are you, and where are the critical safety thresholds? So the fire chief has his professional judgment. We also have to balance how much money does it take against how much risk do we take. The call volume in this town has been steady for many years. If you think you're not safe now, where the hell were you 5 years ago when you didn't even have a full-time department? The town has stepped up to give the fire department 7 full-time staff plus a chief and administrative assistant. Additional growth beyond that has to be justified. To my understanding of where we are, it's not there yet. It just isn't. You're 8,900 people. At some point, around 10, 11,000 people, you're going to hit what mathematically is called the step function. I've reached this point, so now I'm going to have to, I can't just add half a firefighter or 1 firefighter. You'll need to add 3. That is where it really happens. And 3 firefighters, or 3 paramedic firefighters, fully loaded with benefits, is $400,000. Okay? So adding 1 gets us 1 more on each shift, but we're running 3 shifts. So if you want that same coverage level throughout the entire rotation, you got 7. So you would have to add 2 to get 3 on every single shift. And retain them.
Now, man?
Yeah, it's just, $100,000. Our increase this year to the school department total is going to be, what, 300,000? These decisions are contextual. We could be here until 10 o'clock. But that's, it's our job, my job ultimately, to take all of the needs of the town, and how much revenue do we have, and try to fill it all up.
And I would say that's probably the reason it's not included there, because I looked at it as the 5-year budget when we did it. I put a position every there, but I also knew the promise that was made to the citizens as well. So to say my soapbox, probably poor choice of words, but I have to advocate for my department, just to let you know what the needs are, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the funds to do it.
What we try to advocate, all of our department heads, when they're in front of the Board of Selectmen on the FinCom, is to tell you what they need. But that's a request, that's not a budget. The budget I will finally submit to you at the end of March will be balanced.
So it's still unclear to me whether the soapbox, and that's okay, I'm okay with that phrase, whether those items, Chief, are things you, as the head of your department, want this year's budget to be able to address, or you're satisfied with the meeting you had with the town manager and the discussion of the fluidity of the budget.
I'm
and while
satisfied.
you'd like to have more things, at the moment you recognize this is what's a reasonable request for your needs for your department. Do you follow that?
Yeah, I do.
It's
I think
important I've soapboxed myself for the last year or two that all the people coming here on FinCom and putting our time in want to understand that the time is important and that we're just not rubber stamping what Board of Selectmen or the town manager have said is what you're going to be allowed to come in front of us and tell us is all you're going to.
No, that's not the case. I meet with Matt on a regular basis, and quite honestly, I trust his judgment. I think he's going to know. I put it in the budget, in the 5-year budget. It doesn't change, but I also understand the town's fiscal situation. And it's not rubber stamping. It's, I know that he understands what my needs are and where I've come from being here. This is my 9th year as chief, is light years in just the past 3 years. And for that, I'm very grateful.
And you know I trust your judgment. And so I want to hear your judgment. And that's all I'm trying to understand. Which one is what's been put in front of us? And if you're telling me it's a collaboration vote.
Call it a wish list. Call it a wish list.
I'm satisfied that you're telling me it's a collaboration vote.
It is. It absolutely is.
Rather than it being kind of told to you which way it's going to.
If I made it sound like
No.
I was begging for something and I was told no. We talk about this stuff all the time.
Will we see in the next year, to Phil's point, and everybody else's recognition of, a person that's getting paid $3.50 coming out on a call for 8 minutes, will we see next year's budget perhaps start to address those concerns that I'll bet incrementally increase things, $2,680, but make it easier to get call firefighters that we can retain?
I think on that score, I don't want to call it over budget. We budget for a worst case scenario. I think the chief has been turning back out of that.
Last couple of years, but
So we can, to the best of our knowledge, we can afford to make those policy changes within the budget.
right, I agree with you.
We just won't trim back for as much or anything.
A request that's being made to us.
Yeah.
Correct.
We'll be able to upgrade that quarter increment to an hour increment. We'll be able to address each of these things?
Yeah. You saw I went up on the uniforms, and I feel there's enough of a cushion there.
Okay, okay.
And we're talking about going to, for the call people, from a certain period of time overnight, say 10 to 6 in the morning, a 2-hour minimum.
And that's within this budget?
Correct.
Okay, that helps me too, maybe that was a mistake.
It's like the other thing is like with overtime.
Okay.
We've got, I don't want to open up a whole other can of worms, but we have something there where if I get a big nasty call and it's going to take me a couple days of overtime with guys, burn down a block or something like that, well, hopefully that doesn't.
Okay.
Or another tornado comes through that's worse than the one we had a couple years ago.
Yeah.
we've got a cushion. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Great, I appreciate it, thank you.
I'm sorry if there was any
No, not at all. Thank you.
So
One quick one before, so is there, you talked about staffing calculations, is there like an accepted NFPA or some other
There is,
formula?
off the top of my head, I'll give you NFPA. And this is, you've come, it's like 14, right?
14 on the fire ground. Right.
And I'm going to tell you a 14 on the fire ground's unsafe.
Right.
What I will tell you is, I'll give you a perfect example, a fire. Say it's 2 alarms. You need an incident commander, that would usually be me or the deputy. You need an operations chief, that would be Chief Furno. You need an attack crew on inside of the building, that's a minimum of 3 on the hand line or a hose line. You need a backup crew of another 3 or 4 on a hose line. You need 2 or 3 people on the roof. You need 4 people outside so that to rescue what's called a rapid intervention team. If you've got firefighters that get trapped, their job is only to stand there and wait to see if firefighters need to be rescued. You need 2 people or 3 or 4 doing an interior search to check for victims or those who might be trapped. We're up to like 20, 25 guys on a fire ground for it to really be safe.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if the state or all the fire departments in the state had some kind of
NFPA.
formula or some kind of
NFPA is the
standard.
NFPA is the standard.
Okay.
They're up, I think they're really up around 16 or 17.
So in a case like that where something did occur and we didn't have the staff, that's when other towns would have their,
Second alarm fire for me, I kind of called off a working fire the other night. I went, within the first 3 minutes, I went to a second alarm. That brought me probably 4 more engines from another town and 1 covering my station to answer any other calls that come in. And I call, because all our other fire departments are mutual aid, fire department run ambulance services, in other words, I know they're coming to my fire, so they're not even covering their own ambulances. So I have Webster, which is a private ambulance service, come and cover the fire scene for firefighters. Because the high likelihood is high someone could get hurt. So I have them come right to the scene, and then we just call mutual aid, cover any other calls that happen here. And this is what I want people to understand. It is not beyond the realm of possibility to have it happen in Middleton. 3 weeks ago, they had 2 medicals, so all their full-time people were on medicals en route with patients loaded to hospitals when a fire came in with people trapped. I know people think this doesn't happen, but believe me, it does.
It's hard to find a hard and fast rule of thumb. 14 on the fire grounds, what they told us. That was 5 years. Middletown, Rhode Island, that the chief just cited, is familiar to me, and they are critically understaffed. So they've probably got a duty crew, I think their minimum manning is 4, and they staff 5. That's a town of almost 24,000 people with a major commercial center.
wow.
2 interstate highways. They're nuts.
They should be running a 3rd
They should be running
ambulance and
3
having maybe another 4 or 5.
So that's an obvious example.
Yeah.
So there's an association called the ICMA, the International Accounting and Municipal Management Association.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And they put out booklets on, well, how do you know what you need to staff? And if you just go by population, you kind of miss it. Because the population may be very different. Douglas tends to be kind of a younger community, relatively speaking, compared to many of the communities around it. The community where I used to work is called the super aged community. More than 35% of the population of the town, everything's over 65.
Yeah.
That ambulance runs. There's elderly housing complexes, there's people in old homes,
Yeah.
nursing homes, and it just runs and runs. And that's because there's an aging population. So that 50% or it is kind of a magical number. And if I'm on shift for 24 hours and my calls, my reporting, and my prep and recovery activities are well over 50%, then we're starting to look at you're too busy because they're on 24, so they need some time to rest. But they also need time to just be ready to go somewhere. You're almost always better to be a little bit overstaffed, because that's you'd rather have 14 kids on a baseball team than 12 and go to a tournament, right? This is kind of what it's like. 14 is too many during the regular season, but then you go and you have to play 4 games in 2 days. You need that cushion to get you there, and that's where we usually staff the fire service. Are we a little bit short? You know, in an ideal world, maybe we'd have 3 on the shift. In an ideal world, we'd probably have 3 on the road, downstairs. But as between those 2 departments, that would be 5 more people. Fully loaded, they're about 100,000, so it's half of that. That doesn't go away, it's bigger. So that's a conversation that gets joined when you start. And you're not far from it. I bet you this 2020 census will show this town like 9,100, 9,200 people. I know that in Tiverton, they staffed up massively when they reached the 12,000 person mark.
Yeah.
They had to go out and hire a whole bunch of people. But it doesn't, incrementally, it doesn't usually work. It's a package, it's every, because it's 24/7, it's every shift. Every shift rotation needs that lot. Overtime's a good indicator as well, I mean, it's brought up here tonight. 119 in the police department, yeah, 10-year patrolmen's at 70, plus loading, 100. Yeah. One officer wouldn't wipe out that overtime, so.
No, it wouldn't clear the deck on it. It would reduce it, but it wouldn't clear the deck.
I had one shift with 3 members on it, so 2 were medics. So what I would do is, if someone went on vacation, I'd take the junior medic and I'd move them to that shift for that week, so we weren't paying overtime, paying straight time, or take a per diem and put it. Then I had one get hurt, been out for almost a year, so now I have a shift that doesn't even have a lieutenant.
And I know it's getting late, but I do think there are some things that are worth talking about, important to talk about. During the day, the chief is in the station, and downstairs, in the police department, where the chief and the lieutenant are present, as well as the school officer. We have more than bare minimum. Because the chief, thank goodness, is a paramedic. So if one call person shows up, we can run 2 ambulances to do that. That's a better situation during the day than overnight. And interestingly enough, your call volume is actually a day call volume.
It is. I'm starting to see that on the overnight, they're starting to get 1 or 2 calls a night sometimes. There was one night they did 5 calls on the overnight a couple of weeks ago. There's nothing worse than not turning a wheel all day than running all night. There's nothing worse.
Anybody? Anything else?
Oh, good stuff.
Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you, Chief.
So the next thing on our agenda is the possibility of moving into executive session.
No, what about the full committee?
Minutes.
That's it.
Are you familiar with this process?
Hold on. The agenda I see in front of me, the next thing is executive session regarding collective bargaining.
Correct.
I have people here that I presume are here to talk about that. So I'd like to move to that for minutes. So I'm
What version of the agenda?
I gave him the one I printed out. I think you got yours at the end.
right, that's a different issue to move into session.
Litigation?
Yes.
It's a different issue.
Right, but I see executive session regarding the collective bargaining. I'd like to get to that right now.
Yeah, I thought that was next.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I assume we've got to have a motion
So,
in a second.
to move to go to executive session, we would have to cite the exemption from the Open Meetings Act that we intend to use, which is provided for purposes of discussing collective bargaining, and then you can do a roll call vote.
Which is provided to me where?
Your agenda item.
There's 3 in one day.
And then you have to say you're coming out of executive.
Good.
Different documents somewhere,
So they're not adjourning, so they're going to come back in the open session.
right?
So when the board of selectmen does it,
I don't have the citation in front of me. Right.
these guys are not adjourning.
You're looking for a
Do we have
section
a
of the
copy
open
of
meeting law?
the?
I don't have an agenda that's got a site to it.
No, you have to recite extension. You just, the exemption is collective bargaining to discuss.
Oh, okay.
That's good enough.
All right, so let's have a vote per person whether we would like to move into executive session to discuss a collective bargaining issue. Start with in favor or against executive session?
I'm in favor.
I am in favor as well.
Aye.
Aye, yes, aye.
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 Okay, so let's move into executive session. Entertain a motion to move into
Where here?
executive. I'll entertain a motion to vote to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. On motion, let's vote as to whether to move into executive session.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. So I don't need to move this. As chairman, I'm going to do this. We're going to pass over tonight, unless Gene says we can't, the reserve fund transfer voucher section of tonight's agenda, the snow and ice update of tonight's agenda, the old and new business, and the only thing we're going to do is confirm the new dates, which are Feb 11 and Feb 25. We'll fill in. We don't have a meeting on Feb 11?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And Feb 25, folks, okay?
Don't we have another one this month, the 20, oh, that's today.
That's today,
The 28th?
right?
God, where
Okay.
am I?
Wow.
So the only thing
It's all
I
right.
see left
I do
on
it every
tonight's
time.
agenda are a handwritten exec session litigation and adjournment. I'll entertain a motion for either.
Say one thing about snow and ice, even though you passed over, Mr. Chairman.
He crossed it
You
out.
are now, but by law, I have to, I think now
Yes.
with notice. I am not yet asking for any funds because we don't need them. But as soon as we get another storm, we will. So we're at just about zero. So that's part of your notice. I will provide you with written notice.
Oh.
Probably at your next meeting, so we'll probably have at least one snow event.
So just about zero offends the Gene rule.
We almost found a zero.
Are we above it or below it?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, we have to be above it. Otherwise, he would be telling you. Yeah, yeah.
Considering it's such
Wait,
a,
we're,
We have
We-
more than zero left.
that's, okay,
But we
yes,
don't-
okay.
it's
Got it.
Still in the black.
Got it, got it.
Still in the
Yes,
black.
got it. Thank you. Okay.
what do we budget, like
All right,
$10?
so
snow
I
removal
will
this year?
entertain a
Because there's
motion
been no snow practice.
to move
Oh,
into
it's
executive
it's
session
today.
on issues relating to resolution of litigation. Go ahead, Gene, before,
Are you going to be adjourning after executive session? Because I just have a couple notes to talk
Go ahead.
about if you are. Okay. So February 11th, you have the Highway Department and Public Building, which is Adam. They'll both be there.
you're
February,
going to send me an email to confirm that. so
I
that-
believe I already did. I sent you two at once in hopes that you would post them right away. I did it
Okay.
right after the
All
meeting,
right.
Wheel of Fortune.
but I will do that again.
Okay, is
And maybe we can post it tomorrow. We'll be all set. February 20.
that allowed?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, yes, we can get it.
Really?
Snow and ice, approval of minutes will always be on from now on, as
Okay,
well
right,
as reserve.
right, okay.
February 25th, this was a surprise to me. So I had already confirmed the Council on Aging, Library, and Board of Health. So the school would be after them.
We'll do that. We'll cover all of
Very
that.
quick.
Yes,
If they're
yes,
just telling us any
yes.
big
yes,
changes,
Yes,
it's going to be minor.
Board of Health does come with a number of departments.
okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Transfer station.
All right.
So I make a motion that we do a roll call vote to move into executive session
Purposes of discussing.
for purposes of discussing the litigation.
And this is where they can say adjourn.
The litigation.
A second anywhere?
I'll second.
Dick seconded that? I already
can't
did.
second
Dick
everyone.
seconded it? So Lynn, vote, please.
Aye.
No, in
Listen.
Missouli.
Missouli, aye.
Mike Petnack, aye.
Howard D'Amico, aye.
Phil Landry, aye.
Heather Moore and I.
Cool.
Sandy Kuiper's aye.
Okay.